Hello and welcome to the Get Creative Podcast, the podcast for creatives by creatives. I'm Evan Schmidt, and my guest today is Tracy Moran. She's the senior editor at Aussie.com. All right, so Tracy Moran, thanks for coming on the show. Tell me a little bit about you.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Evan. I'm a journalist of the last 20 years who's also a mother of two. And I've lived overseas for the last 15 years. We just moved back to America last summer. So I've spent a good proportion of my adult life in England and Germany. So I've worked in newsrooms all over Europe as well as here in DC.
Wow, that's very very nice background, very diverse experience. I'm sure not many people get. So what's something important that you've learned?
Well, I think living overseas has really shaped how I see the world. And for me, one of the things I lived while living in England especially is that no one appreciates it there when you take yourself a little too seriously. And that's a big difference between Americans and Brits. So, and you see it in all walks of life. So they never want to be seen to be seen, they don't want to be seen as being too earnest in England. And that was something my first editor in England liked to point out to me all the time. So I'd march into his office with organized presentations, making pitches for everything from, needing a pay raise to launching new columns or just getting more column inches from advertising or whatever. And while I often got what I came to ask for, the conversation always led to him saying something like, why do you Yanks take yourself so seriously? And as an earnest Yank at the time, I didn't really see it. So I just kind of roll my eyes and think, God, what's wrong with him? But over time, I began to understand that most Brits weren't acting the way I was. Like everything I did or said was of vital importance. I guess when I say this, don't get me wrong. I think ambition, and American ambition in particular, is to be applauded. But, and you can't dial it back too much because then people they might think that you can't deliver. But there's also a case to be made for subtlety and self-assurance and social skills. And I learned that in the British newsrooms, that, 10 to 15 years ago over there, I found that the brightest minds around me were people who had never been anywhere near a university. So a smaller percentage of British journalists actually go to university, or at least they did then. You can still get your credentials, of course, but you don't necessarily have to go to a 4-year university before doing so. But what really mattered, in addition to being able to write and edit, of course, was their confidence and their ability to engage in banter, and laugh at themselves. But they had to be witty. So that's what living overseas taught me, to never presume that I'm the smartest in the room, to never assume that what I'm saying is the most important thing being said, to lighten up and dial it back a bit on the earnestness, and never take myself too seriously. But I think that doing that and learning how to converse with people from all walks of life and all cultures actually in turn gave me more confidence than I had ever had before. Part of it's just growing up, of course, too, but I kind of came of age over there as an adult. So that's your experiences shape you, and that's how I see living overseas and how it shaped me.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I love it. So what are you working on here back in the U.S.?
Well, for the last 3 years, I've been working with a great team of creatives at Aussie. It's a popular digital magazine launched by Carlos Watson, a former CNN and MSNBC anchor, and his friend Samir Rao. They launched it 3 years back, and I'm sure I'm biased, but we bring readers the smartest roundup of news in the business with our presidential daily brief, as well as 8 unique globally minded features that aim to keep you ahead of the curve. So we do things like profile the Simone Biles and Misty Copelands of the world before other news outlets would. And we tell you about trends from around the globe in any industry that are about to break big.
Oh, that's cool. Well, as the notifications on your phone were indicating, you're a very busy person, as I can figure out how to speak now. And but yeah, great advice. And check out the website Aussie.com, OZY.com. And Tracy Moran, thank you for coming on my show today and getting creative.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great to take stock and reflect on these things, so I appreciate the time.
That's it for another episode of Get Creative. You can find more information about my guest in the show notes. Subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and Stitcher so that new episodes magically appear. And tell a friend about this show. For more information about me, just go to evanschmidt.com. Thank you for listening. Now go get creative.